In the Middle Ages, rats and mice were everywhere. They ate food, spread sickness, and made life even harder for poor people. But peasants didn't just give up. They found clever, simple ways to deal with the problem. Some were smart, some were strange, but many of them actually worked. One of the most trusted ways to fight rats was simple: get a cat. But not just any cat. A good mouser was a treasure with 4 legs. In the 1300s, during the time of the Black Death, some cats were so prized they sold for what would be hundreds of dollars today. These were the original security systems, silent, sharp, and never asking for overtime. Stealing one wasn't just rude. In some places, it could actually get you in trouble with the local law. Medieval peasants knew that not all cats were equal rat catchers. The best weren't those fancy cat nobility kept, but scruffy ones with quick reflexes, sharp claws, and what they called the hunter's eye. That intense stare that meant business. The top mousers typically had stocky bodies and short tails, perfect for chasing rodents through tight spaces. Some towns even kept records of the best rat-catching cats. A particularly talented mouser might earn its owner tax breaks or special privileges. One record mentions a cat who caught over 50 rats in a single month, earning its owner free ale at the local tavern. That cat wasn't just a hunter, it was a walking, purring meal ticket. Peasants tested kittens by watching how they reacted to moving objects. Quick pounces meant a keeper. Slow or uninterested kittens were given away. A lazy cat was just another mouth to feed, something most peasant families couldn't afford. A medieval cat couldn't get away with just being cute. It needed a killer resume, literally. They rewarded successful hunts with treats and sometimes released mice in barns for practice. Our next mousers were so valuable that peasants would lock them up at night. Trained ferrets became the secret weapon for getting rid of rats that hid in places too small for cats to reach. These slender, tube-shaped creatures might seem like odd choices for pest control, but their long, flexible bodies made them perfect for the job. Medieval peasants valued ferrets for their ability to squeeze into tight spaces where rats made their homes. Unlike cats, which hunted on their own terms, ferrets required training and handling. A well-trained ferret could be sent directly into rat holes, burrows, and spaces between walls. These little hunters were basically the medieval version of snake cameras, except they came back with dead rats instead of plumbing problems. Training a ferret wasn't simple. Young ferrets had to be taught to return to their handlers after being sent into a hole. Peasants often tied a small bell or piece of cloth to their ferrets so they could track where they went. What made ferrets especially valuable was their determination. Once on the scent of a rat, a ferret would pursue it relentlessly through passages no human or cat could access. Medieval records show that a single ferret could clear a small granary of rats in just a few hours. Ferrets earned their keep not just by killing rats, but also by creating absolute panic in the rodent population. Rats would flee in terror when they smelled a ferret, often running straight into waiting traps or the paws of cats stationed at exit holes. While ferrets tackled the rats hiding in walls and underground, some peasants turned to another approach that didn't require feeding or training at all. Spicy herbs and strong-smelling plants scattered around homes became medieval rat repellent spray before spray was even invented. Peasants discovered that rats hated certain smells that humans found pleasant or tolerable. Turns out rats were the original picky roommates with sensitive noses. Mint leaves topped the list of rat-repelling plants. Peasants would crush fresh mint and sprinkle it around doorways and windows. The strong menthol smell was apparently rat kryptonite. Rats smelled mint and thought, nope, not going in there. Smells like someone's trying way too hard with medieval breath freshener. Garlic came in as a close second favorite. Crushed cloves were placed in corners of grain storage areas and kitchens. The sulfur compounds in garlic drove rats crazy, and not in a good way. Rats avoided garlic like teenagers avoid chores. Some clever medieval farmers would soak rags in garlic juice and hang them from rafters, creating a smell barrier that rats refused to cross. Wormwood, a bitter herb still used to make absinthe today, proved especially effective. Its intensely bitter compounds were unbearable to rats, though humans didn't exactly throw wormwood-smelling parties either. Most peasants preferred the sharp smell of wormwood to the disease-carrying pests themselves. Mustard seeds ground into powder and sprinkled across thresholds created another line of defense. The spicy, pungent aroma that gives mustard its kick was too much for sensitive rat noses. Medieval rats would rather starve than walk through what basically amounted to a medieval hot sauce obstacle course. One medieval manuscript from the 1400s lists a special mix: equal parts mint, garlic, wormwood, and ground mustard seed, all mixed with a bit of vinegar. This potent mixture was their version of super-strength rat repellent. The smell was probably strong enough to make even the rats need those little medieval handkerchiefs. For peasants who couldn't afford a good mousing cat or didn't have access to trained ferrets, these spicy solutions were a godsend. These herb barriers served double duty in medieval homes, keeping away rats while masking the smell of unwashed peasants at the same time. When herbs weren't enough, though, some turned to solutions that weren't just unpleasant, but downright deadly. Rat poison in medieval times wasn't some carefully measured scientific formula. It was a wild mix of whatever deadly stuff peasants could get their hands on. From arsenic-rich minerals to hemlock plants and even ground glass, medieval DIY poison was as dangerous as it was creative. When your pest control might kill your family too, you know you're really committed to the cause. Most poison recipes were passed down through generations by word of mouth. One 1200s manuscript describes mixing ground hemlock with honey to create baits that rats would eagerly consume. The writer included a warning to keep it away from children and pets. Medieval for, "This stuff will absolutely kill everything." Arsenic topped the medieval toxic ingredient list when available. Peasants would collect white arsenic powder from mineral deposits or buy it from merchants. Mixed with fat or cheese, it created deadly rat bait. Medieval rats probably wondered why their friends kept dropping dead at the all-you-can-eat cheese buffet. Frank was fine until he hit that third helping of Gouda. Ground glass and rat poison might sound bizarre today, but medieval folks believed tiny glass fragments would tear up a rat's insides. Must have been reassuring at medieval dinner parties. Is that seasoning on my stew, or are you trying to murder rats and guests with the same recipe? The dangers were enormous. Accidental poisonings happened frequently, especially among children and pets. One French record from 1329 tells of an entire household sickened after rats dragged poisoned bait into the family's flour storage. Nothing says family dinner like everyone suddenly developing mysterious stomach pains. Village authorities sometimes banned certain poisons after particularly bad incidents. A 1400s English town record prohibits arsenic rat baits after 3 children died in 1 month. Still, with rats destroying precious food supplies, many peasants continued the practice secretly, like medieval Breaking Bad, but with worse chemistry skills. While poison could kill many rats, it rarely eliminated them completely. For every rat that died, foaming at the mouth, others bred rapidly to replace it. This limitation led medieval people to develop other methods that didn't risk killing everything in the household. Pit traps became a popular rat-catching method among medieval peasants who wanted something safer than poison, but still effective. The concept was brilliantly simple. Dig small holes in areas where rats frequently traveled, disguise the opening, and wait for the unsuspecting rodents to fall in. These traps were popular because they were effective, safe, and cost almost nothing to make. Medieval households typically placed these traps along walls, in corners of grain storage areas, or near known rat holes. The pits didn't need to be deep. Just 6 to 8 inches was usually enough to prevent rats from jumping out. The real trick was in the design of the pit's interior. Smart trappers would line the bottom and sides with materials that made climbing impossible for tiny rat claws. Clay was a common lining material because when smoothed and allowed to dry, it created a slippery surface that rats couldn't grip. Watching a rat try to climb slick clay walls was medieval entertainment before Netflix, complete with dramatic falls and failed escape attempts. Some peasants used animal fat or plant oils to grease the sides of unlined pits, creating an equally challenging escape route. Children were often assigned the task of checking the pits each morning, a chore that combined pest control with entertainment. A record from a 1340s English manor notes that during one particularly bad rat infestation, a system of 20 pits throughout the property caught over 60 rats in a single week. The beauty of pit traps lay in their reusability. Once emptied of rats, the same pit could be reset immediately with minimal effort. Medieval budget spreadsheets would have shown excellent ROI on pit traps, if spreadsheets or budgets had existed back then. Some clever medieval trappers enhanced their pits with additions that increased catch rates. One technique involved placing a thin stick across the pit with food balanced in the middle. When a rat tried to cross the stick to reach the food, its weight would cause the stick to spin, dropping the rat into the pit below. Nothing said, "I hate my neighbor" in medieval times, quite like dumping a bucket of live rats over their fence at night. While pit traps worked well for ground-dwelling rats, medieval people needed other solutions for the clever rodents that preferred high places. This led to some interesting innovations that made use of something completely different. Sound-based rat repellents might seem like a modern invention, but medieval peasants created their own versions of noisemakers and whistles specifically designed to drive away rodents. At first glance, the idea of scaring away rats with noise might seem silly, but there was actual wisdom behind this seemingly strange approach to pest control. The concept was based on observations that rats would flee from sudden, unfamiliar sounds. Medieval peasants noticed that rats disappeared during loud celebrations or when metal workers were hammering nearby. Some clever folks put two and two together and realized that creating specific noises could help keep rats away from homes and food storage areas. One common device was the rat whistle, typically made from hollowed reeds or bird bones with holes carved into specific positions. When blown, these whistles produced high-pitched sounds that humans could barely hear but drove rats crazy. Medieval rat whistlers must have looked ridiculous, standing in their barns at sunrise, blowing on bone flutes like deranged pipers with an audience of 0 humans and hopefully 0 rats. Manuscripts from the 1200s describe rat pipes that were played near granaries before opening them. The high-pitched sound would send any rats inside scurrying for the exits where they could be caught by waiting dogs or cats. Some villages even had designated rat pipers who would make rounds through storage areas once weekly, playing their specialized instruments. Metal noisemakers were another popular option. Simple devices made from thin copper or iron sheets would be hung from ceilings on strings. When the wind blew or someone walked by, they would clatter together, creating unpredictable noises that kept rats on edge. The constant clanging probably kept the humans on edge too. Medieval homes must have sounded like someone dropping pots and pans every few minutes. Did these sound-based methods actually work? Modern science suggests they might have had some merit. Rats have sensitive hearing and can detect frequencies far beyond human range. Sudden, unpredictable noises do cause stress responses in rodents and can discourage them from settling in a particular area. The methods were certainly less dangerous than poison and less work than maintaining a cat or ferret. Many peasant families developed specific rat-scaring rituals, like banging pots together before entering food storage areas or stomping heavily near known rat nests. Children were often tasked with making these noises, turning pest control into a noisy game. One 1400s household guides recommend that children march through storage areas each evening, making the loudest racket possible to keep rats away during the night. Rats can actually adapt to predictable noises over time, so changing up the sounds was important. Medieval pest control experts, if such a job had existed, would have given 1-star reviews to families that used the same banging pattern day after day. Your rat-scaring technique lacks creativity, and your rhythmic banging has basically become rodent lullaby music. The downside? Neighbors. Living next to someone who believes strongly in noise-based rat control must have been a special kind of medieval torture. Village records occasionally mention disputes between neighbors over excessive rat-scaring noise, especially at night. While sound offered a creative approach to keeping rats at bay, medieval people also tried to trick the rodents using a completely different strategy. Fake predators and scare toys were a creative medieval strategy for keeping rats away by playing on their natural fears. Just like modern gardeners might place a plastic owl to scare away birds, medieval peasants carved wooden animals that resembled the natural enemies of rats. These silent guardians were thought to trick rodents into believing a deadly predator was nearby. Wooden owls were among the most popular rat-scaring decoys. Carved from a single piece of wood, these owls ranged from crude, basic shapes to impressively detailed sculptures with painted features. The best carvers would add real feathers to enhance the realism. Medieval product review for wooden owl decoys: 5 stars. Rats disappeared for 2 whole days. 3 stars off because they came back, and 1 chewed the owl's face off. Would buy again. Wooden or clay snakes were another common choice. These were often painted with patterns resembling local snake species known to hunt rats. Some clever peasants would position these fake snakes partly hidden under straw or in dark corners, making them seem more realistic and threatening. Did these fake predators actually work? Surprisingly, they might have, at least temporarily. Rats do have instinctive fears of predator shapes, especially when they're unfamiliar. However, rats are intelligent creatures and quickly learned which threats were real and which were just wood. This led to an interesting arms race between humans and rats. Medieval rat scarers had to regularly move their decoys around to maintain the illusion. Medieval interior decorating driven entirely by rodent psychology. Records show that some households rotated different types of decoys weekly to prevent rats from getting too comfortable. Some creative peasants took the idea further by creating motion-activated scare toys. A 1400s German manuscript describes a pivoting wooden hawk that would rock back and forth when the wind blew through a window. The most amusing aspect of these fake predators was how they sometimes backfired. Rats would eventually recognize the decoys as harmless and would occasionally nest right beside them or even gnaw on them. One medieval account describes a wooden owl that became so damaged by rat teeth that it looked more like a plucked chicken than a fearsome hunter. When even the most fearsome wooden predator failed to keep rats away, medieval peasants turned to an even more primal approach. Human hair, urine, and other bodily byproducts became surprisingly effective rat repellents in medieval times. The entire concept might make your nose wrinkle, but medieval folks weren't afraid to get gross if it meant keeping their food supplies safe. This approach was based on the belief that rats generally avoided areas with strong human scents, likely due to their instinctive fear of people as predators. Hair collected from combs or during haircuts was carefully saved instead of being thrown away. Peasants would stuff this hair into small cloth bags and place them around food storage areas, in corners of homes, or near suspected rat entry points. Medieval household guides recommend changing these hair packets monthly to maintain their effectiveness. Urine, yes, actual human pee, was considered among the most powerful rat repellents available. Medieval chamber pots got a second career as pest control devices. Cloth soaked in urine would be placed in strategic locations, usually outside entrance points to buildings. Some households even designated specific corners of their property where family members should urinate to create a rat-repelling perimeter. A 1400s text recommends male urine over female, claiming it contained stronger scents that rats found more threatening. The document further suggests that urine collected after eating strong-smelling foods like garlic worked best. Fingernail clippings joined the arsenal of human-derived rat repellents. These would be scattered in small piles near food storage areas. Rats apparently drew the line at hanging around human nail salons. Sweat-soaked clothing items were also repurposed as rat deterrents. Work clothes worn during hard physical labor would be cut into strips and hung near doorways or windows. The effectiveness of these methods likely varied. Rats do have strong instinctive reactions to predator scents, including humans. However, hungry rats in winter might ignore even the strongest human smells if food was scarce enough. Still, these methods cost nothing and were easily implemented, making them popular among the poorest peasants. While these smelly solutions helped keep rats away from certain areas, medieval people also realized that the best way to deal with rats was to prevent them from accessing food altogether. This led to some extremely clever and practical innovations. Smarter storage methods became one of the most effective ways medieval peasants protected their precious food supplies from hungry rats. Rather than simply trying to kill or repel rats, these clever techniques focused on making food completely inaccessible to the rodents in the first place. As the saying went in many medieval villages, a rat that can't reach can't eat. The simplest and most common approach was to hang food in sacks from ceiling beams. Grain, dried meat, and other preserved foods would be placed in sturdy cloth bags, then suspended high above the ground using ropes. The height alone deterred most rats, but medieval peasants didn't stop there. They added extra protection by placing metal discs on the ropes, similar to modern squirrel guards on bird feeders. Medieval architects never planned for hanging food storage, leaving many peasants with the original ceiling fan, a sack of grain swinging dangerously over dinner. Sealed containers provided another layer of defense. Clay pots with tight-fitting lids were common, often sealed with beeswax or pitch around the edges. Wooden chests for storing bread and flour might have their seams sealed with pine resin, creating an airtight and rat-proof barrier. For larger food stores, many households built elevated platforms on legs. These platforms would stand several feet off the ground, with each leg topped by a wide wooden or metal disc that rats couldn't navigate around. Rats looking up at these food fortresses must have felt like medieval soldiers facing a castle without siege equipment. Perhaps the most innovative solution was the greased pole storage system. Smooth wooden poles would be coated with animal fat, then placed upright with food platforms at the top. Rats, despite their impressive climbing abilities, couldn't maintain their grip on the slick surface. The effectiveness of these methods is evident in records from medieval manors and monasteries. One monastery record from the 1400s notes that after implementing suspended storage systems, grain losses decreased from nearly 20% to less than 5% per year. While these smarter storage solutions proved highly effective, they weren't perfect. During severe famines or particularly harsh winters, desperate rats would attempt increasingly bold strategies to reach food. When all other methods failed, some medieval peasants turned to a solution that might seem shocking to modern sensibilities. Eating rats was a desperate but practical solution during the harshest times in medieval Europe. When famine struck and hunger gnawed, some peasants turned pests into protein, from nuisance to necessary nutrition, medieval recycling at its most extreme. During severe famines, rats were actively hunted for food. Several chronicles mention communities cooking rats, with one 1300s account describing how even the vermin became precious when bread was but a memory. The most common cooking method was simple stewing with available vegetables and herbs. What meat is this? Forest chicken. Very rare forest chicken. An average brown rat weighs about half a pound. Not impressive by modern standards, but significant to a starving medieval family. Some terrible famine years saw rat meat openly sold in markets, sometimes at prices higher than chicken. Medieval medical texts acknowledged rat meat's nutritional value while recommending thorough cooking. Medieval 5-star restaurant review: the rat was cooked to perfection, would starve again. Medieval food safety tip: if your rat meat is still squeaking, it needs more time on the fire. The practice disappeared as food security improved in later centuries, standing as evidence of the extreme measures medieval people took when facing hardship.